So, welcome to this video. Content warning for sexual harassment, and there will be a mention of suicide briefly later in the video. So, of course, take all the precautions that you need for your own mental health. We very much promote that here. So, by all means. This isn't the Ubisoft video, that has actually been made and is ready to go, but this situation kind of dropped, and I wanted to get this out first because it seems like people are taking this more seriously. But then again, it's all about striking when the iron is hot in regards of these situations, in terms of trying to maximize the amount of people that get awareness. Even people like me can bring this to the awareness of other people, because not everyone follows the same creators, right? And for example, I watched a Repzilla video about it. They treated the subject with the amount of respect that it deserves, and they actually gave the entire lawsuit in the description of their video, which is incredibly helpful to other people, because Bloomberg, who originally brought this to the mainstream, only cherry-picked some of the more incendiary stuff. Well, they only had a little bit of it, unfortunately. It is actually much worse than what Bloomberg initially let on. They are going to have follow-ups with that, of course, because I'm sure Jason Schreier mentioned that on Twitter the other day. But yes, unfortunately, let's dive into this. So we're going to start off with the introduction part of the lawsuit. Obviously, they said they're headquartered in California since the 70s. Unless they're trying to avoid tax, of course, then they may move that around, to get the best deal, so to speak, like all the other corporations do. A highly immoral practice. They're being investigated as such for it. I've mentioned this all before. Sexism has plagued the male-dominated game industry for decades, and increasingly so in recent years. It certainly does appear that the world is getting more bigoted. I think just from the way that these groups have been validated, if you will, by the presidency of Trump, or the fact that we have a PM who has said racist things in the UK, Boris Johnson. And the people who vote for him just simply don't care about that, So it just allows this kind of thing to get worse. He's also said sexist things as well, which is not a surprise, because he's a right-wing politician. They do tend to be quite bigoted, and there's a default position. And gaming's never really been that progressive at all, really. Remember 10 years ago, where the straight white men were the face of every game? Back then, I didn't even think about it. It was the norm to me. And then a few years later, when this talk about representation and diversity, I was one of the chuds that was against it, unfortunately. Because I just had a really narrow view of representation, and I was looking at it all wrong. I didn't feel represented unless it was like a nerdy, skinny Brit. And none of those spring to mind. I'm sure there's probably like a couple. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. No character springs to mind from anything. So I didn't feel represented. So I was like, it's not a huge deal for me not to be represented. So why other people are moaning about it, kind of thing, And I was ignorant to the whole idea of diversity and representation. And it wasn't until I learned what it actually meant, I was like, oh, it's not actually a bad thing whatsoever. And then I grew up a bit. I'm a very late bloomer when it comes to development. Women and girls now make up almost half of gamers in America. And yet, they have to deal with shit that we don't as dudes. They really do. I know female streamers, for example, and it doesn't matter the size of you. And unfortunately, it levels up. The amount of sexual harassment or comments about your body that you have to deal with only increasingly, exponentially goes up the more popular you get, unfortunately, because the more eyes on you, the more likely you're going to attract the chuds. But even smaller creators have to deal with it on a regular basis, men that don't know any boundaries and think that you owe them a favour because they watch your streams, or if you're not considered conventionally attractive, they'll just be incredibly cruel about your appearance and other disgusting behaviour. In Activision Blizzard, the workforce is only about 20% women. The top leadership is also exclusively male and white, and the present roles have always been held by white men. Very few women ever reach top roles at the company. When they do, they have less salary, incentive pay, and total compensation. Now, we've obviously mentioned Robert Kotick a lot over this year. It would be unlikely that anyone will ever get to his level of salary because he's vastly seen as overpaid. But I do think mischievous stakeholders, shareholders, and other people at the top of the company could potentially use him as a scapegoat to say, well, he's overpaid and we're trying to do stuff about it, but we can't, so we want to make sure we don't get into that situation again. That could be used as like a get out of jail free card. Oh, that's what we're trying to do. We're not doing it deliberately, but it's just like pay people the same. There is no need for this disparity effectively. And this disparity, you'll find reasons for it, why it happened as we go on. And they aren't good. There is never a good reason. So, like the executive ranks, women across the company are assigned to lower paid and lower opportunity levels. Female employees receive lower starting pay and also earn less than male employees for substantially similar work. They promote women more slowly and terminate them more quickly than their male counterparts. Faced with such adverse terms and conditions of employment, many women are forced to leave the company. Imagine that for a second. Think of all the jobs in the past that you've not had you've had no security at. It affects you on a daily basis. That stress will affect your decision making, among other things. It's a miserable situation to be in. Particularly, it happens to everyone when you first start a new job. You end up doing so much more work than everyone else at the company because they've been there a while and they're secure in their position, where you feel like you have to prove yourself to get the same treatment or the same respect. I burnt myself out doing that at my first job. And then that became the level of what was just expected of me all the time. And then because I was burnt out, I couldn't ever get back to that level. And, I got treated differently because of it. But, oh, woe is me. Let's get back to the lawsuit. Defendants have also fostered a pervasive frat boy workplace culture that continues to thrive. In the office, women are subjected to cube crawls in which male employees drink copious amounts of alcohol as they crawl their way through various cubicles in the office, and often engage in inappropriate behaviour towards female employees. Male employees proudly come into work hungover, play video games for long periods of time during work, while delegating their responsibilities to female employees, engage in banter about their sexual encounters, talk openly about female bodies, and joke about rape. That sounds fun, doesn't it? The idea of a cube crawl is just weird. But you must be so uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of it. Only a office situation that's so far gone and has been so normalised, for sexism, would even consider doing that, It is a boys' club. This idea that it's a male industry isn't just perpetuated by those who consume the games, it's obviously perpetuated by those who make them as well. Particularly, this is what this whole lawsuit is about, unfortunately. And also, imagine going into your work hungover or playing games at work. You wouldn't last there very long at all. Even doing any of this other stuff, potentially. I say potentially because I've been around places and I know places that just don't take sexual harassment seriously whatsoever, unfortunately. Which is why I'm so outspoken on the subject. It pisses me off. I don't really have to deal with it as much. I mean, I have, and I did, but in terms of the sheer volume, it's only ever happened to me in a workplace once, where I imagine it's a regular occurrence for female and other gendered co-workers, for example. Unsurprisingly, the frat boy culture is a breeding ground for harassment and discrimination against women. Female employees are subjugated to constant sexual harassment, including to having to continuously fend off unwanted sexual comments and advances by the male co-workers and supervisors, and being groped at the cube crawls and other company events. High-ranking executives and creators engaged in blatant sexual harassment without repercussions. In a particularly tragic example, a female employee committed suicide during a business trip with a male supervisor who had bought butt plugs and lubricant with him on the trip. Christ, that is a grim thought, isn't it? Somebody has lost their life to this behaviour, and they really haven't done anything about it. They haven't made any sort of change whatsoever, and this was all kept hush-hush, so nobody ever knew about it, you know. That's the kind of thing that should light the media by storm, but they managed to bury the story. We didn't know about it until now. And of course there's a thing where it comes to the respect of those who have lost their loved one. But the fact that somebody's actually lost their life over this, I think for me anyway, I don't think I've seen that before in a situation like this, in this industry anyway, to be specific. So they really should get the book thrown at them. They should anyway. But the fact that somebody's lost their life over this, if that doesn't make you sit and think about company policy and the working environment, then nothing will, really. Also, fuck that supervisor. I hope he gets fucking prison time. Because that's the thing. The supervisors hold power over you, and sometimes they use that to their advantage, and they, pressure you into doing things that you don't want to do. Unfortunately, this is normal behaviour at any job. You don't want to do something, you get pressured into doing it. And it's just become a normal thing. Numerous complaints about unlawful harassment, discrimination, and retaliation were made to the human resources, personnel, and executives, including to Blizzard Entertainment's president, J. Allen Brack. I've always thought he was a twat, to be honest. This just confirms it. I thought he was a twat over much less major situations, right? His ability to give a non-apology has always been great. Probably more of that soon. What a surprise. HR doing nothing about workplace culture. They are part of the problem. They always have been. HR never really tries to get to the bottom of something or change anything. They're like a PR department within the company itself. They protect the people who are paying their wages, not those who have received abuse at the company, unfortunately. We've moved past the need for fucking HR at this point. It doesn't help anyone but the people that pay them, because that's their incentive. But Blizzard also failed to take effective remedial measures in response to these complaints. Employees were further discouraged from complaining, as human resource personnel were known to be close with alleged harassers. Of course. If someone's abused you in a company, and the head of the people supposed to, in theory, do something about it, are close with that person, you're not going to trust them, are you? I don't blame that person for not trusting them. Because people protect their own all the time, no matter the allegation. It is just a thing that we do as human beings, unfortunately. An internal investigation into the Human Resource Unit noted that there was a big lack of trust and that HR were not held in high regard. I'm not surprised. This was the same thing that happened at Ubisoft, and they made changes to their HR in an attempt to change the situation. But I doubt that it will really ever get that trust back unless they're seen to do stuff about it. Unsurprisingly, employees' complaints were treated in a dismissive manner and weren't being confidential. So, that leads to retaliation, doesn't it? It would. Because if this is like a culture of inherent sexism at the company, everyone will be at fault. Or the vast majority of people will be at fault in some way. So they all look to save their own asses by retaliating against those speaking out. This is why, this specific retaliation is why it's so important not to disregard someone making an allegation anonymously. Because if they don't do it anonymously, they get retaliated against, which could then be losing their job. And I think most people realise that a job right now in the pandemic is more important than it ever has been. And there's less job security than there has been in a very long time, maybe more ever than in my entire lifespan so far. And what was the retaliation? They were deprived of work on projects, they were transferred to different units, and selected for layoffs. I'm going to scroll past procedural history and government enforcement action allegations, because I don't really understand what's being said, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I am not a lawyer. I do know somebody that is a lawyer. Unlike the stereotypes of said lawyers, they are a wonderful human being. We're on to the factual allegations part now, and this is about the pay. So, Activision Blizzard have engaged and continue to perpetuate discriminatory practices regarding pay, assignment, promotion, and other terms and conditions of employment which negatively affect and impact the female employers. These practices begin at hire, where women were offered lower compensation and less lucrative job assignments and opportunities than their male counterparts. Defendants paid female employees significantly less in starting pay than their male counterparts at hire. The pay disparity continued throughout employment for female employees, and they were paid not only significantly less at hire, but after hire also. They were afforded less stock and incentive pay opportunities. They were overwhelmingly assigned into lower grades and levels with less pay opportunities, stock opportunities, and opportunities in general. They just received these incentives less than their male counterparts across the company. They're also in the lower levels of the hierarchy and had to work harder and longer to earn the equal promotional and other opportunities as their male counterparts. For example, a female employee working for Blizzard Entertainment was assigned to a lower level role, denied equal pay, and subsequently sought a promotion because she'd been carrying out duties exceeding her job description. She was repeatedly told it was not her turn and others deserved a promotion ahead of her. Ultimately, the employee was promoted after 3 years, while her male counterpart was promoted within a year of his hire, despite having started several months after her. Her male counterpart was also assigned leadership responsibilities, which she was not afforded. Responsibilities which furthered the male employee's ability to get promoted. In another example, a female employee who worked at Blizzard Entertainment was assigned to a lower level, denied equal pay, and passed over promotion despite multiple factors that suggested she earned. She got highly rated performance reviews, she generated significantly more revenue in her marketing campaigns than the male counterpart, she ran almost twice as many campaigns as them. Despite her accomplishments, her male counterpart was invited to have monthly or weekly one-on-one meetings with the vice president. She was not afforded these same opportunities and, unsurprisingly, was passed over for a promotion in favour of the male counterpart. Similarly, other female employees were assigned to lower-level roles and paid less, or delayed or passed over from promotions by male counterparts who didn't have the same level of experience or qualifications, but because they were friends with the male head of unit. A newly promoted male supervisor delegated his responsibilities to his now female subordinates in favour of playing Call of Duty. Other male supervisors would refuse to communicate with female employees, going to their male counterparts for information. A female human resources employee at Activision Publishing was delayed and passed over for a promotion despite receiving positive performance reviews, doing substantial more work than a male counterpart, and taking over the actual responsibilities of the departing person. Female accounting employees at Activision Publishing likewise note that male counterparts were paid significantly more Despite doing the same or less work and having less responsibilities, female employees were also not promoted because of the discriminatory practices against pregnant female employees. A female employee working on one game team had assumed some of the responsibilities of a manager, but when asked her male supervisor about being fairly paid for her work she was actually doing and promoted into the position, the manager commented that they could not risk promoting her as she might get pregnant and like being a mum too much. In general, female employees were further treated negatively due to their pregnancies. Supervisors ignored medical restrictions given to female employees and gave them negative evaluations while they were out on maternity leave. Other female employees reported that they were criticised for leaving to pick up their children from daycare, while their male counterparts were playing video games, and female employees were kicked out of lactation rooms so employees could use that room for meetings. They're not even trying to be progressive at this point, Activision Blizzard, you know? Jesus Christ, we live in a dystopia when you think about it. They want to have that much control over your life that they want to punish you for having children because you're not going to be able to be milked of all of your productivity for an extended period of time because you are having children. Jesus Christ. This is why the world needs more feminism, by the way. Women are being treated worse because of something that they have no control over in regards of, you know, potentially pregnancy can happen by mistake. And sometimes, you know, to get out of that mistake, abortion. But that's a very, very controversial topic, you know. And in some places, it is not available. And then it's just like, well, just don't have kids then. But like to the same degree, a man doesn't have to sacrifice his career by having sex, effectively. Not only can he impregnate people at an alarming rate when I found that out. Like, allegedly, men can impregnate 9 women potentially a day. And yet all of the onus has always been on the women to not get pregnant. Birth control has always been seen as the female thing, when it should be more of a male thing, really, because we're more of the flight risk, you know. A woman can only be pregnant once. We can get loads of people pregnant and don't have to face the consequences of carrying the child for 9 months. Good Lord. You would think more people would, like, consider this, but they just don't. Women of colour were particularly vulnerable targets of the discriminatory practices. An African-American employee noted that it took her 2 years to be made into a permanent employee, while men hired after her were made permanent employees. She was also micromanaged, such as that her male co-workers, who were known to be playing games without any intervention by a supervisor, but her supervisor would call and check on her if she took a break to go on a walk. I hate micromanaging. It doesn't increase productivity whatsoever. In fact, it has negative impacts on it. At least in my experience, based on my personality, you know, it only makes me do things slower because I'm just getting frustrated or angry at the microscope that's being constantly put on you, you know. And it never really used to happen to me that often. So imagine the person who's just being watched by every move, and this level of injustice. Your employees are just fucking about doing no work, and if you take one break, you're the one that's being kept an eye on. It must be so aggravating. Another African American employee who worked on IT was similarly micromanaged by her manager, unlike the men on her team. When she requested time off work, her manager made her write a 1-page summary of how she would spend that time off of work, while obviously nobody else had to do a write-up. This is like something out of fucking Harry Potter. Jesus Christ. The male supervisor also criticised her body language, despite male counterparts slouching in meetings, and she was scolded for asking for assistance, while others could get help on similar tasks without the same criticism. These experiences led female employees to leave their employment. I'm not surprised. They'd feel incredibly uncomfortable being constantly treated differently, constantly supervise, over supervise, but just constant watch. Like if you've ever been like constantly watched in any situation, it's inherently uncomfortable. When women complained to human resource personnel about lack of equal employment opportunities, especially in comparison to their male counterparts, their complaints fell on deaf ears, or were met with an empty promise to investigate the issue. Indeed, despite having retained Paul Hastings LLP from 2015 to 2017 and Miller Law Group in 2018 to allegedly provide analysis related to compensation data, Activision Blizzard failed to take effective and reasonable steps to prevent pay discrimination, as the pay disparity between the male and female employees was not remedied and continued. Female employees noted that they accepted less compensation than they were making in their prior employment or offered by other companies to work for Activision Blizzard, with the hollow promise that they would get promoted or get other forms of compensation to make up the difference. They never made up ground, and instead had to watch as male comparators were promoted more quickly and offered more compensation, forcing them to leave the company. They were also more likely than their male counterparts to be terminated. So, building on from the frat house mentality and the crew crawls, the jokes about rape and so on, women at the company were constantly subjected to numerous sexual comments and advances, groping, and other forms of harassment. One female employee said that a random male employee would approach her at work and comment on her breasts. Female employees working for the World of Warcraft team noted that male employees and supervisors would hit on them, make derogatory comments about rape, and otherwise engage in demeaning behaviour. This behaviour was known to supervisors and encouraged by them, including a male supervisor openly encouraged a male subordinate to buy a prostitute to cure his bad mood. In a blatant example of Activision Blizzard's refusal to deal with a harasser because of his seniority, Alex Afrasabi, the former senior creative director of World of Warcraft at Blizzard Entertainment, was permitted to engage in blatant sexual harassment with little to no repercussions. During BlizzCon, Afrasabi would hit on female employees, telling him he wanted to marry them, attempted to kiss them, and put his arms around them. This was in plain view of other male employees, including supervisors who had to intervene and pull him off female employees. Afrasabi was so known to engage with harassment of females that his suite was nicknamed the Crosby Suite. I think they mean Bill Cosby, because after alleged rapist Bill Crosby, but it's Bill Cosby. So that's kind of weird. I'm just going to check, actually. Yeah, no. That's just a clerical error, unfortunately. Afrasabi would also call females derogatory names at company events. His conduct was known to executives who took no measures. G. Allen Brack, the president of Blizzard, allegedly had multiple conversations with him about his drinking and that he'd been too friendly towards female employees at company events, but he was given a slap on the wrist, i.e. verbal counselling in response to these incidents. Subsequently, Afrasabi continued to make unwanted advances towards female employees, including grabbing a female employee's hand and inviting her to his hotel room and groping other women. So this is going into the suicide thing with a little bit more detail. She committed suicide on a company trip due to a sexual relationship that she was having with a male supervisor. The male supervisor was found to police by having a butt plug and lubricant on the business trip. Another employee confirmed that the deceased female employee may have been suffering from other sexual harassment at work prior to her death. Specifically, at a holiday party before her death, male co-workers were alleged to be passing around pictures of her vagina. This was known about to the very top of the company. The former chief technology officer was observed by employees groping inebriated female employees at company events, as was known for making hiring decisions based on female applicants' looks. An employee complained to JL and Brack in early 2019 that employees were leaving due to sexual harassment and sexism. Specifically, this employee noted that women on the BattleNet team were subjugated to disparaging comments, the environment was akin to working in a frat house, and that women were not huge gamers or core gamers and not in the party scene. Not into the party scene, were excluded and treated as outsiders. That's as far as, for the moment, that's as far as the allegations go. There's a lot of them to unpack there. All in all, it leads to an incredibly horrendous working environment to be a woman in, isn't there? You know, you get paid less, you have to work your ass off only to be sexually harassed or assaulted in that manner, with unwanted groping and so on. This is the biggest company in entertainment space, and it's not just Blizzard. The sexism is at Activision as well, and I think it's important people know that and keep that in the mind. They're paying female employees less at Activision while their CEO sits in his ivory tower continuously getting overpaid. Unfortunately, a warning of the content coming up, we're going to be continuing along with this kind of situation, so it's not going to be the most easy videos to watch coming up. As I mentioned at the start, we have Ubisoft video coming out. There are more Ubisoft things since, so I'll either make separate videos about the articles or combine them in some way, and it'll take time. Obviously, I'll be keeping an eye on this situation. More allegations may come to a light, and then, you know, I will want to spread that as far as I can, because it's very important, I believe, that as many people as possible are aware of this happening. Because once people are aware that this is widespread, it becomes more likely that people want to do something about it. Because that's the thing. If it's always treated as like a minority of this, a minority of the companies doing this, it never truly gets treated with the same seriousness that I believe that it should, in my opinion. But anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you have a lovely day or whatever, because this was a lot to go through, wasn't it? But that aside, I'll see you in the next video.